I would like to present to you our International Restorative Justice and Victim Offender Dialogue process presented by Hope Prison Ministry, who is based at the Bethapila Training Center at the Paulsmoor Management Area since 1998, although the ministry already started in 1991. I would like to say from the offset that we are extremely sensitive when it comes to the victims of crime and their families. Therefore, we want you to know that we are aware that it can take up till a minimum of 1 year to prepare victims of crime and their families, and also to empower them, because this process is an extremely sensitive process and we do not want to re-victimize victims. But also, why do we say International Restorative Justice and Victim Offender Dialogue process? While over the last few years we had people that came for training from all over the world, whether it is the USA or Canada or England or Switzerland or Germany or Sweden or Australia and Lithuania. We do have many countries that is involved with our restorative justice and dialogue process for offenders and victims. We also spend time in other countries like Sweden, Switzerland, Lithuania, England, America, Canada, and also the Seychelles, Nigeria, and also Kenya. And wherever we present this process, people really embrace this process as we do this in custodial settings. Why custodial settings? Why not with children at schools and youth at risk and other institutions or in our communities? Well, we are called to this ministry by God for restoration and healing for those incarcerated, and then I will share with you others that also need to be on board. And so we found that those who are already sentenced, even to a life sentence or more than a life sentence, still benefit from this restorative justice and victim offender dialogue process. This is presented by myself and my wife, Jenny Clayton, and we are the International Restorative Justice and Victim Offender Dialogue facilitators. We also the founders and executive directors of Hope Prison Ministry. We are linked with the International Prison Chaplains Association, and I'm also serving on the global board as a member of Restorative Justice International. So I trust that this little information will help you to get a bigger picture about our International Restorative Justice and Victim Offender Dialogue process. Restorative justice involves three parties. In short, VOC. The V is victim, the person harmed. The O is the person who caused the harm, and the C is the community, the place where the harm was committed. It's all about justice. Justice had to prevail, and for justice to prevail, all three parties needs to get on board. And this is beyond racial and cultural boundaries. It's all about inspiring innovation, producing new ideas, boosting creativity, and learning more about the best restorative justice and victim offender dialogue processes. Why restorative justice? It's all about restoring. Restorative justice values and principles and the legislative mandate in South Africa is excellent in terms of the support for restorative justice and the victim offender dialogue process. The Correctional Services Act, Act 111 of 1998, Chapter 4, Section 38, says on assessment stipulated as soon as possible after admission as a sentence offender. Such offender must be assessed to determine his or her restorative justice requirements and needs regarding reintegration into the community one day. Section 41(6). Sentence offenders may be compelled to participate in programs and to use services offered in terms of Section 1, 3, and 4, where in the opinion of the National Commissioner, their participation is necessary, having regard to the nature of their previous criminal conduct and the risk they pose to the community. I would like to say that restorative justice, neither the victim-offender dialogue process is compulsory. Offenders can still decide whether they want to be part of this process or not. But offenders also need to know, in terms of their previous criminal behavior and the one that caused them now to be incarcerated, if they really want to be part of a healing and restoration process, they will definitely sign up voluntarily to be part of this healing and restoration process. It's not about parole. It's about how can I make right the wrong by taking responsibility, and we will look at that at a later stage as well. Furthermore, rehabilitation should not only be seen as a tool to help offenders to return to the community, but as a means to long-term crime prevention. To be effective, rehabilitation must incorporate all aspects of the offender's life and offer opportunities for education and training, personal development, personal well-being, socially, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The restorative justice process is about an encounter, and it is not an easy process to be confronted by people that you cause harm to, especially the offenders. The restorative justice process is about an encounter. Opportunities for victims, offenders, and the community to meet voluntarily and discuss the crime and its aftermath and the effects of that if they do desire so. The restorative justice process also is about amends, restitution. To expect offenders to take steps to repair the harm they have caused by taking responsibility. You will find that this word responsibility will come up many times because they have to consider to take responsibility for their crime and their criminal behavior, and to make themselves vulnerable to the restorative justice and victim-offender dialogue process, which is not easy. It is not easy for the victims or the victim's family to come and face the person that caused so much harm in their lives and destroyed their future. But it's also not easy for the offender to face the people because of guilt and shame and regret. Therefore, taking responsibility is extremely important for them to consider. Restorative justice process is also about inclusion. Provide opportunities for all parties affected by the crime to participate in its resolutions with the support of a multidisciplinary task team. I believe that we can't work in isolation on this extremely important process regarding restorative justice and victim-offender dialogue. We need to work together. We can't claim this process for our profession alone. a multidisciplinary task team is very important. Because chapter 3 of the white paper referred to rehabilitation is a societal responsibility. We are all responsible for healing, restoration, deliverance, and reconciliation of our people in our country, so that we can also see how we can assist other countries as well. Restorative justice is also about reintegration. And the question is our clients incarcerated ready for integration? Because our aim is to heal the wounds of crime between the victims, the community, and the offender through the restorative justice and victim-offender dialogue process. And if this takes place and these three groups can get together in some areas where it's possible, reintegration will be more effective, because the victims or the victims' families had the opportunity to ask their questions or to express themselves. The community can also get involved, because the offender will go back to his or her community, and the offender needs to consider to be part of this process for him or her to be reintegrated back into their community. According to the white paper on corrections in South Africa, rehabilitation is defined as a result of an approach that combines the correction of offending behavior, human development, and the promotion of social responsibility and values. Rehabilitation should be viewed not merely as a strategy to prevent crime, but rather as a holistic approach. The scary reality, and people don't want to hear about this, because the moment we mention this, people feel that we are now looking for excuses for crime. But I can say today to you with all conviction, you can go to any country and you will find the challenge in terms of behavior, but also some reasons why the behavior is unacceptable. The antisocial behavior in children are said it's because of poor parenting, absent fathers or no loving father figure as a role model, and also inadequate mothers. And my explanation in terms of inadequate mothers, what we find many times, where mothers leaving their children with their parents or family members, and they move on with a boyfriend. And also when they abuse alcohol and drugs and neglecting their children that's supposed to be fed by them. And because of this reasons for antisocial behavior in poor parenting, absent fathers, no loving father figure as a role model, inadequate mothers, we found that the challenges is there is a character trait that becomes visible. And the one character trait in terms of this challenges is fearlessness. And we were sitting with many offenders over these years, and they will tell us how they operated in the past regarding crime, and also for the crime they committed while they're now incarcerated, and it all happened with fearlessness. But almost 80% up to 90% will share with us about poor parenting, absent fathers or no loving father figure as a role model, and inadequate mothers. Sometimes all three, sometimes one or two of the three. Fearlessness. The second character trait is aggressiveness. wow, they become so aggressive. And when you look at the brutal crimes that was committed and what they did during the crime, after the crime, it's scary. It's very, very scary how aggressive they are. And they will also share with us very, very openly about their own lives in terms of the roots of their upbringing in their homes. The third one is sensation seeking. That is why they join up with the gangs. That is why they come into correctional facilities and they join up with a number game. Because they are now sensation seekers. They looking for really sensation. They want action. They want power. They want to manipulate. They want people to know who they are. And for that to happen, they need to join up with the people that gives them that rank or that position. Fearlessness, aggressiveness, sensation seeking. And the result is violence, antisocial behavior, criminal activities, and they also lack a sense of moral responsibility and social consciousness. This information came from a psychologist, Dr. David Laken from the USA. Poor parenting, absent fathers, no loving father figures, a role model, inadequate mothers. The character trait, fearlessness, aggressiveness, sensation seeking. It's a scary reality. And we face these challenges every time when we do a restorative justice process with a group of offenders. So we need to understand and we need to know the importance of parenting, present fathers, visible fathers, loving fathers figures as role models, and mothers that needs to take responsibility for their kids. But the mothers' lives was also messed up by the fathers of these children. So the home is extremely important. The home should be the cradle of nurture. I think it is important to mention, especially to people in our communities, that the Department of Correctional Services has no choice to receive anybody into correctional facilities that were sentenced by the court of law. Whether they were identified as psychopaths, kleptomanias, pedophiles, pathological liars, habitual criminals, renowned gangsters in the community, or drug lords, those identified as sexual offenders, the white-collar criminals, all these kind of people are coming into correctional facilities. And there is a mindset that the communities want these people to change overnight. Communities are extremely frustrated many times because they feel that the Department of Correctional Services must change these people as soon as possible. But you have to be aware of the background of these kind of people. You have to be aware of the deep-rooted issues in their lives that many times even stem from their own childhood days. The challenges that they experience in their homes in terms of physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and how we understand that hurting people hurts people. And we are dealing with this people in the restorative justice process. Obviously, as a multidisciplinary task team. Social workers and psychologists and the chaplains of the Department of Correctional Services are on board with us as a team of Hope Prison Ministry. They know that they can't do it on their own. We can't do it on our own. We need to work together, and we meet up with these people in our restorative justice process. Yes, there are many people that have their own understanding about psychopaths, kleptomaniacs, pedophiles, pathological liars. But it's the greatest joy for us to meet up with these people face to face in restorative justice processes. And many of the professionals in the Department of Correctional Services made statements already, even on video, how this restorative justice process had breakthroughs in the lives and the minds of these kind of people. So the restorative justice process do not stand back for any kind of person's behavior of the past or any identification, like I mentioned before. It doesn't stand back for any person. We're dealing with the principles of restorative justice. We take them through the restorative justice path, and we experience how there is even a mindset change. And more of that when we come to the principles of restorative. As we will talk about the behavior of offenders, the criminal behavior, the criminal mindset, I just want to point out that this was a challenge even in biblical times, because Paul warned Timothy in 2 Timothy 3 verse 1 to 9 about this kind of people. And he said to him that people will be lovers of themselves, narcissism, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderers. They will be conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people, Paul told Timothy. But we are meeting up with these people, and we see how much hope there is for people with this kind of behavior. But let me also say, with all respect, that we do have people even in our communities, in our homes, and even in our churches with the same kind of behavior as well. And so it is not just those incarcerated. There are also people maybe that was never caught, that are living like this and even serving God with this kind of behavior. And therefore, this restorative justice process is for everyone. In verse 9, Paul is saying to Timothy, but they will not get very far, because, as in the case of those men, their folly will be clear to everyone. But we know that the people that we encountered with, when they realize their sin, their wrong, their unacceptable behavior, we see the hope as we continue to journey. It is important to emphasize the criminal behavior, because when people come into correctional facilities, unfortunately they come in with their own story. The reason why they got involved in this crime, and they believe their story. Some of them also pleaded not guilty and coming into correctional facilities after they were found guilty and still claim that they're not guilty. And there was one management area that had 90 offenders. And the majority of these 90 offenders were sentenced to life. And even after being incarcerated for more than 10 years, up till 18 years, and I think 122 years, they still claim that they are innocent, and they will give you their side of the story. And myself and Jenny and our team from that region came alongside these offenders. And we also had an extra group at a later stage of females too, and some of them also pleaded not guilty and claimed not to be guilty. And as we worked with these people through this restorative justice process, where we helped them to look at the bigger picture, not just how they explain the crime and how they see and understand their criminal behavior, but more, we want to look also at sentence remarks, judgment remarks, focus on the brutality of the crime, the seriousness of the crime, and then we look at the reasons why they were found guilty and why they even got a life sentence. And to the surprise of the professionals even, who called on us for this restorative justice process, that more than 95% of those who pleaded not guilty, who live a life that they are not guilty, even after being incarcerated for 10 years, they told their families at our family reconciliation process, they told them, we lied to you, we are guilty. And so it is important that we look at the criminal behavior and help them to understand the bigger picture. Therefore, our recommendations is always to help them to focus on the roots with reference to the crime that was even committed against them during their childhood days. We can't ignore that. We can't just point out to them the evil that they did and do not recognize the evil that others did to them. And we had many breakthroughs, emotional as it is, we had breakthroughs. And again I say that we realize in that process where we deal with their childhood days and how they had a raw deal, we could see and they could see hurting people hurts people. We also focus on the roots of their criminal behavior. Why did they commit the crime so brutally? If I give an example that actually getting a little bit nervous just to think about it. Someone that raped a woman and then used a bottle afterwards and put it into this woman's private part. How can you do something like that? We had many cases like that. We look at the challenges of their past, present, and future behavior, and also the challenges of gangsterism and the number. And it's very interesting how gangsters will tell us, we don't murder people, we only kill gangsters. That's the mindset. We help them to understand the damaging effects of their criminal behavior. That's why the victim-offender dialogue process is so important, that they can hear first and from the family of the victims in terms of murder, what the criminal behavior caused in the lives of these people. We address parenting, family relationships, the importance of education, vocational skills, employment, the effects of substance abuse, peer pressure, the importance of resilience. Many of them never experience resilience, and the emotional stability that they need before they go back into their communities and their homes, which can be challenging. We also refer our clients on the restorative justice to the professionals of the Department of Correctional Services for further therapy. And there are many challenges, deep-rooted issues that the professionals also had to deal with. Many of that are also spiritual challenges, and that is where we also come alongside them, because we believe that deliverance and healing and restoration is possible from a spiritual point of view. We also believe that no VOD should take place if people are still in denial of their crime, because we can't let the victims be re-victimized again. Now let us look at the restorative justice principles. And we experience over the last few years, as we share these principles with our restorative justice participants, how these principles brought them to a crossroad. The very first principle that we shared with them and dialogue with them and hear their opinion is that restorative justice recognizes that crime damages relationships. I wish I can tell you every story how we help them to understand that damaged relationships. But the latest one, just before our lockdown here in South Africa, the beginning of March, we met with a group of offenders on our restorative justice process. The very first day, this gentleman said to his stable facilitator, "I hate my mother. My mother didn't raise me. And I am so angry towards my mother." And the facilitator came to share that with me during our evaluation time at the end of the day. But it was amazing that what we created over the years, because we're dealing with people with a criminal mindset. And it's very difficult for them to really understand the damaged relationships caused by the crime, because they feel that their parents support them. They can come home with stolen goods, they can come home with a stolen firearm or an illegal firearm. They just feel that the relationship between them and their families are okay. But we got permission from the Department of Correctional Services many years ago to help them understand the damaged relationships by phoning their families, those who give us permission to phone their families. But the catch is that we're not going to phone your family and speak in private to your family. You're going to give us permission that when we speak to your family, everybody's going to listen. So we normally have about 3 to 4 people that agree. Some of them feel, "Oh no, this is too tough." But you know what? Those who give us permission is already the breakthroughs, not just for themselves, but for everybody. It happened to be that this gentleman who hates his mother, he gave his mother's number for us to phone. I phoned his mother. Everybody listened to the conversation. And to everybody's surprise, I think he was surprised and shocked too, where his mother was saying that, I love my son and I miss my son. And then she gave us details and she said, my son left my house on the 19th of December 1999. I thought, wow. He was then sentenced to life. But I want my son to know that I still love him. And she also mentioned that he didn't grow up with her, and she gave us reason for that as well. And then she said something that was so significant that we could use that to break their minds further. She said, tell my son on Wednesday, which is 2 days later, it will be my 70th birthday. Now on that day, her 70th birthday, 2 days later, she was in the restorative justice process as we got permission to let her in. And he could give, as a person with a life sentence, his mother a cake and a birthday card and a present. And we've got footage of the response of that offenders. And more than 80% of that offenders that was on that restorative justice was a concern for the authorities because of being high profile offenders. But they were down and out. One person said emotionally that even the task force was surprised when he said, when I listened to this guy's story, when I looked at his mother, I'm thinking now of my own mother. And I realized that our crime damaged even the relationships between us and our families and the victims of crime. Because on the second day of this process, we bring in victims of crime, not related to their crime. And that's a breakthrough. So the restorative justice recognize that crime damaged relationships. But furthermore, they also have to recognize that for this damaged relationships to be restored, it needs to be addressed. That broken relationship between them and the victims and the victim's family, their own family, community, they can't run away from this. It must be addressed. They recognize as a principle also that they must take courage to repair that damaged relationships caused by crime, as challenging it will be. Furthermore, they must consider to take full responsibility for their actions and the harm they cause. They need to start telling the truth. They need to answer the victims truthfully as they will take responsibility. They have to focus as a principle on the harm caused by this crime and to reduce future harm by preventing further crime. But more also, they have to think different about crime and their criminal behavior. And they need to be determined to seek, to amend, to repair, and to be part of restitution. Now with restitution, we will share with you later on what we also share with them, because it's not always that there will be money in terms of restitution. There's other ways as well. Now with these principles, everybody can so easily say, we accept these principles, we recognize that crime damaged relationships, we know that we need to be part of addressing these broken relationships, taking responsibility, thinking different about crime. But we have a challenge to them. And we're saying to them, listen here, if you are really serious about how you messed up the lives of people in terms of your criminal behavior, in terms of your gangsterism and being involved in the prison number, then you need to take action. And the true sign of remorse for you must be to consider to break the ties with your negative friends outside, but also to break the ties with your negative prison influence and prison culture. Now there is a culture and a mindset within the prison gangs that when you join them, there's only one door out, and that is death. And we challenge them to that point. If you are serious, even knowing that you can be killed tonight, and you are so remorseful and you're breaking the ties with these people, knowing that you can be killed, then you come and stand in front here next to me. And we had more than 25% per group that will come and stand next to me. And then I asked them, what if they kill you tonight? They said, I don't care. I don't want to live like this. Because this restorative justice principles is now opening my eyes also. The damaged relationships that I cause in the lives of people that now hate me, that don't want me to be in the community, my own family, the community itself. I need to think different about crime. I need to take responsibility. I need to allow people to come and confront me. I can't live like this anymore. And even those people, to the point of death, that came forward, some of them are also now restorative justice table facilitators. So this principles in action is extremely powerful. So let us look at the practical restorative justice path. We now completed our memorandum of understanding with the Department of Correctional Services. We gave them the date that we're available. We're doing this restorative justice over 6 days, 6 hours a day. My wife is doing it with the females for 3 days a week, over 2 weeks, and then the Saturday of the second week she will have the family reconciliation process. But with the male, we're doing it from the Monday to the Saturday, 6 hours per day. We have everything in place. We also had to trust God for financial support for this process, because our process is designed in such a way that as we spend the 6 hours with them, it is just common sense to share a coffee and donuts with them in the morning, and giving them a lunch for the afternoon, and how we help them to understand the importance of sitting around the table, having a meal with people. And many of them, even emotionally, will tell us that they never sat around the table and having a meal with their families, because they're always busy in terms of crime and criminal behavior. And so this is one of the ways that we come alongside them. So it costs us a lot of money, especially when we have to travel to different management areas and even staying over. But when all these things are in place, and as we trusted God for finances, and we want to thank our supporters that are really coming alongside us in terms of this restorative justice process, and how we come alongside not just the offenders, the victims of crime and the community, but also coming alongside the Department of Correctional Services staff as well. So the professionals, the chaplain, the spiritual development coordinator, and the social workers and psychologists they will now give us the name list because we don't recruit people, they recruit people, and they will give us the people that they feel that needs to go through this process, which is excellent because then we didn't have any part in the recruitment of restorative justice participants. And so now we're going to start with this action. We've got the first day, and the first day we're looking at the crisis. We're looking at the damaged relationships. We're looking at their own behavior that became unacceptable. We're looking at the roots of their criminal behavior, but we're also looking at who they are and the questions that we ask them during the first day. Who are you? Where do you come from? Why did you get involved in this crime? And even who hurt you? And did you ever speak about that? And then obviously there are denial in the very first day, but we give them that space because they realize that if they are going to be in denial even about their own pain, or they don't want to talk about it, then they will never feel free within them. So then the principles of the path of restorative justice, which many restorative justice people use across the world, which is also very biblical, is accountability. We discuss with them. We discuss with them taking responsibility for their actions and their responses. And we're looking at what is crime and why crime. We help them to examine the roots of crime and also look at solutions. We spend a lot of time in terms of looking at confessions, and we had many confessions even about crime that they never came forth with in terms of their behavior in the past. We're looking at repentance, and repentance that it's important to experience in repentance is that genuine remorse. Even the judges will say we didn't see remorse. And you know what, something that sounds a little bit funny, but many of them were telling us they didn't even understand the word remorse when the judge said that you had no remorse. And some people wanted to know, what is remorse? So it is also very much ignorance, and so we condemn people also in terms of looking at them and telling them that they have no remorse, and they don't even understand the word unless you have to explain it to them. To be heartbroken for your wrongdoing, but in such a way that you will turn your back from that kind of lifestyle. We discuss forgiveness, God's forgiveness, forgiving yourself, and also forgiving others that hurt you, because if you not forgive, you won't experience freedom. We're looking at restitution, to pay back, putting it right. And what we are saying in restitution, because people don't have money to compensate victims. The government doesn't even have money to compensate people. But what we tell offenders, if you want to give something back to the victims in terms of restitution, give them the truth by taking responsibility. And then we're looking at the concept of reconciliation, to rebuild that relationship, because it is not just an overnight thing. When people forgive you, that there won't be just reconciliation immediately. You have to work towards reconciliation as well. And then we come to the conclusion by the 6th day with the family of the participants, where they can respond to their families as their families experience also being victims of crime as well, and how crime affected them. And when the families respond to them, they can also respond, and many times the response is apologies from both sides. And this is about the personal restoration, the wholeness, the healing, to move on in life. And we experience within the first 36 hours powerful breakthroughs. We've got hundreds of video clips that we can show people the breakthroughs within the first 36 hours of this restorative justice process, with a group of 24 to 30 participants. Then we have our 8-week follow-up sessions for 3 hours per week. My wife then is doing 6 hours per week. We are also looking at extending our follow-up sessions because there is so much more individual counseling that we had to do and further assessments in preparation for possible victim-offender dialogues, so that healing can take place, because healing, restoration, reconciliation is possible, but it is a process. And it is exciting to be part of this restorative justice path. Come on board, come and observe, and come and see how your finances can bring change in the lives of hardened criminals that were once rejected, but how this process embraced them and give them new meaning and hope for a future. Now imagine you make contact with the victims of crime or their families just because Johnny or Sarah will come up for a parole consideration. I would like to hear from anyone, whether you are a correctional official or in the Department of the Police Services or in social services, or even as a victim offender dialogue practitioner, or even a coordinator in terms of victim offender dialogues, whoever. I would like to know from you, do you think it is right for anybody to just go knock on the doors of victims and invite them to a correctional facility for a possible victim offender dialogue process because you need a victim report for the parole board? And as I mentioned very early, and refer to the Act 111 of 1998, Correctional Services Act, that how soon we need to start with this restorative justice process to avoid rushing to victims for a victim report or for the parole to make a decision. That is extremely disrespectful, and it's also extremely more painful, and we have the responses of victims that was confronted in such a way. And so I want to call on anyone involved in restorative justice and victim offender dialogues. Let us be sensitive. There are many offenders that were not even ready emotionally, psychologically, and without proper restorative justice principles that they embrace, but they are encouraged to be part of a VOD. And many of our offenders also do that because they want parole. It's very insensitive, because this is not for parole. And that is why we need to start with people very early in their sentence, because then you don't have to bother with the victims of crime. I'm going to give you one example. There was a lifer at one of the correctional facilities, and this person was 4 years in the life sentence. Very challenging in terms of behavior, felt I've got nothing to lose. I can tell the officials what I want to because I've got nothing to lose. I can even spit next to them because they can't charge me for that because I didn't spit on them. The behavior was just unacceptable because the mindset of this offender is, I've got a life sentence, so you're going to sit with me for the rest of your life or my life. And then we had a consultation with this person, and this person signed up for the restorative justice process. A lifer, 4 years in the life sentence. And we experienced with the authorities the change of behavior of this person, realizing this is not about me. It's about recognizing my crime. It's about taking responsibility. It's not about denial. It's not about lies. It's about the truth. And that person experienced healing from within and even freedom. And the behavior also changed. So the sooner we can start with this restorative justice process, the better. So that we don't have to rush to victims. My prayer is that we need to respect our victims of crime and their families. We must be very, very sensitive when it comes to the victims of crime. And we will never understand this unless we became victims of crime or our families became victims of crime. And if we became victims of crime or our families, then we need to be extra sensitive. We must never push for this restorative justice process or the victim offender dialogue process for the sake of stats. It is extremely disrespectful to push for stats regarding this process. That is why this process needs to start very early. And so when we know that there is empowerment and support for the victims and the victims' families of our clients, then we know that we have a few years to engage with our offenders first and to see how truthful they become. And then we can engage with those working with victims of crime. But if we do it different, and even if you want to continue to do it different, remember, it's disrespectful, it's insensitive, and you will feel the punch by the victims and the victim's family and even the community. So please let us be sensitive, because crime has a ripple effect. It is not just the victim, and in the case of murder, it's the entire family of that deceased. It is also not just the victim and the victim's family, it's also the offender's family that are also affected by this crime. To hear the news that your loved one committed that murder or that rape or that armed robbery, it's a huge shock. And so we need to make space for our victims of crime and the secondary victims, which is the family of the offenders, but also thirdly, the community. We need to engage more with our communities. That's why I believe that the imbisos that we had before is extremely powerful, where we could empower the community. We had once an offender that lied in court. He lied through more than 5 years of his sentence that he didn't rape that woman who was staying in his street. And in the restorative justice, he recognized his victim, taking responsibility, and we had the victim prepared for almost 18 months before she came to confront him, and he took full responsibility and apologized to her and took all the blame on him and not blaming her for anything. it set her free in such a way that the management agreed that we take the offender to that community with the victim, and we had around about 400 people of that community together in the hall with the offender, with the victim, where the offender told the community, I'm guilty, I lied to my parents, I lied at court, I lied at you people, and I apologize. Now the community blamed this woman because she was drinking with him, and she was blamed because it's because of her that he's in prison. But he said, no, it was not because of her. I planned this. That's why we wanted her to come and drink with us. What a reconciliation process. So let us be sensitive when it comes to victims of crime, so that we do not have more women and children being abused and raped and murdered. Let us be sensitive to the violent crimes in our communities. Let us know that our offenders need to take full responsibility for their crime, because crime had a ripple effect, and even correctional officials, the ambulance staff, the forensics, the police are all affected by the crime, because they had to see the after effects of the crime as well. So crime's got a ripple effect. There's more people that got hurt. And so what is important when it comes to the victims of crime, we share with the offenders and we ask their responses whether they know what victims really experience. Experience disempowerment, the loss of safety, disrespect. Victims won't trust easily. They will always be suspicious. And we share that with them because they want to come out back into the community, and they want to be or confronting the victims. Why do you look at me like this and all that? But they need to understand that they won't be trusted easily, and there will be people that will have a suspicion on them. So they need to understand that the loss of control of their feelings and the memories of the victims and the victim's family. We've got a lady, after 28 years, is still very emotional when it comes to the day when her father was murdered, and even the day that he had to celebrate his birthday, but he's no longer there. So that loss of control of feelings and memories is there. Then we also shared with them the feelings of the victims, and many of the victims, not related to their crime, will come in on our second day and share with them how they felt that they were violated, their fear, they shocked, they were humiliated, they frustrated about crime because people are just getting out again so easy. They're angry and they're upset and they're sad that people don't change as well. So the experience of the victims, the feelings of the victims is important because many of them are still bitter and angry. And then offenders also need to know, and all of us need to know, what victims want. Victims don't just want a VOD. They want offenders to know what they experience, to know their feelings, but victims want truthful answers. Victims also want the offender to take full responsibility for their actions. No excuses about poverty, no excuses about being under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Take full responsibility for your crime. Victims also want to be empowered again. I want to see you in the community and I need to feel safe because you are a changed person. Victims also want the opportunity to tell their story face to face to the offender, but it is a process to prepare them for that process as well. And victims want restitution. What can you give us back? And if you can't give back the money, if you can't give back the body, if you can't give back any actions, at least give us back the truth by taking responsibility. And victims want to experience the offender's remorse. They don't want to hear from us that the offender is remorseful. It is much better if they in a VOD experience the offender's remorse. One lady was saying to the offender, you know what, I will never forgive you. 4 times she said that. And the offender said to her, you know, I did not come for this process to be forgiven. I want to listen to your pain, that I can remember your pain. And at the end of that, the lady said to her, you know, you're smart, you're such a beautiful young lady, you killed my daughter, but I'm going to ask God to help me to forgive you, because she experienced the offender's remorse. That heartbrokenness for the wrong, she could prove that she turned away from her wicked ways and she started to behave well in the correctional facility, and she looked now positive to a new lifestyle, and that is the change that the victims experience. We didn't have to convince the victim's family about the change. So there is that ripple effect, but also victims are so angry that we need to be careful and we need to be sensitive that some victims want to take revenge. And unfortunately, we had cases where people took revenge, and that is very sad, and we want to avoid that. And now some victims will also never forgive. But we're telling the offenders it's not just that the victims won't forgive you, as long as you make use of the opportunity to give them the truth and to apologize to them and to let them see that you are truly remorseful and you are a changed person, then time will help them one day to forgive you. So that is important, that we know about the victim's experience, their feelings, what they want, and also recognize their anger as well. So let me conclude by just mentioning to you who are part of Restorative Justice Victim-Offender Dialogue, please never arrange a VOD if the offender is not going to be truthful and not taking responsibility and has too much excuses. That's going to be more painful if the victim's going to hear all the excuses other than the truth and taking responsibility and experience the true, genuine remorse. And we had tough cases in VODs. But when offenders take responsibility, there is that true remorse, they're turning away from their wicked ways, they gave the victims the truth, we experience how possible forgiveness and acceptance is. So let us do this process in a dignified way and heal our country, heal our land. I want to also conclude by saying to any correctional facility, doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can have the best programs behind bars. You can have the best therapies behind bars. You can have the best rehabilitation processes in terms of whether offenders is making furniture or skill development or education. If you do not touch base with the community and the victims of crime, then I want you to know that the offenders, your client, is going to struggle after their release because they might be further victimized. So if you want to help your offenders, don't just help them with education and vocational skills and therapies. Let us get everybody on board that was affected by crime. I thank you for that. Then lastly, also to know that restorative justice is also not a solution to all the crime, and it may not transform all offenders, but I can say it is a better response to crime than our traditional understanding of justice. But let me tell you why it's not a solution to all crime. And many times it is because some offenders choose not to be truthful for some reason. Seems to me that some of them want to go to their grave with the truth. Now, obviously, guilt and shame and regret. But we thank God for those who are truthful. And then also, some offenders don't want to answer confrontational questions like, where is the money? Where is the body? People even ask. And who helped you? That questions sometimes do not get answered because it's too confrontational. Especially, where is the body or who helped you? And then many of them, when they return after restorative justice process, it won't help and work for them if they continue with the number gang inside the prison and their own lifestyle. Unfortunately, they might have all the concepts of restorative justice, but if they back into this lifestyle, it's going to be challenging. And also, if there is no sign of determination to change, then this process is not working for them. But it's not the process, it's their choices. And also, they don't want to deal with their own pain and shame issues. That's why the process won't help for them. And some of them are too institutionalized, they're living with a mask, and they choose to live like this. Unfortunately, this is their own choices, and we can't blame restorative justice or the victim-offender dialogue if this process don't help them. But let us come alongside them, encourage them, equip them, empower them, so that they can consider to give the victims of crime the truth and nothing else but the truth. Thank you.